Okay, so then what happens from the time of this colonization? So we've got to the point where the baby's colonized, and then what happens is the baby gradually develops what we call it the adult flora. And what it dictates this and drives this is the food that the baby starts to eat. So the solid food, the different food types that we eat, drive the diversity of our microflora. And because toddlers, by the time that they're 2 to 3 years of age, are eating all the major food groups that we eat as adults. So think of toddlers 2 to 3 years of age. They're eating meats and fish and vegetables and fruits and pasta and breads and so on and so forth. So they're eating most of the major food groups that we eat. And because that drives our microflora, or microbiota, the 2 to 3 year old toddler has an adult flora. And that adult flora remains the same from about 2 years of age until about 50 years of age. After 50, then our microflora does some strange things. So we lose populations of lactobacilli, we lose populations of bifidobacteria. And at the same time, we actually lose some immune effects, so immune functionality. Our immune system becomes less efficient. Those two things might be linked. Okay, so given that most of you here are between 2 and 50 years of age, most of you here between 2 and 50, this is what your gut flora looks like. Before I go into this, how many people here either take probiotics or recommend probiotics to patients or customers? Hands up. So quite a few of you, Okay. And the type of numbers in terms of what we call bacterial numbers per capsule, what does the product typically contain? And normally it's between, 1 billion or 2 billion and maybe 25 billion. Is that right? 30 billion? 30 billion? Anyone else? Most of them are between 1 and, let's say, 30 billion, right? But at the start of the day, I said in your GI tract, you've got 100,000 billion organisms. 100,000 billion. And you're giving 1 billion or 30 billion into 100,000 billion. That's a tiny amount, isn't it? It's a drop in the ocean. So, but do you see probiotics working? Yeah, they work. So how do you square that particular circle? I'm saying there's 100,000 billion, you're giving 5 billion or 10 billion or 12 billion or 30 billion. It should be a drop in the ocean, but you see it working. Okay, keep that thought for a moment. This is what happens, or this is what our GI tract flora looks like. And there's a couple of trends here. As we go down through the intestinal tract, the numbers of organisms increase and the diversity increases. But let's split our intestine up into the small intestine and the large intestine. Okay, here is the small intestine, the light blue area here. It's about 20 feet long. It's a long tube. Here is the large intestine. It's about 4 feet long. Okay, in the small intestine, which is made up of the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. This is what we see. In the duodenum, lactobacilli are dominant, about 100,000 organisms per gram. When we say that, what we mean is when the duodenum's empty and we scrape it, the scrapings, we find about 100,000 organisms per gram. In the jejunum, so the duodenum is this bit here, the jejunum is most of the other bits here, and the ileum is this part here, the last part of the small intestine. So in the jejunum here, we have 10 million organisms per gram, again dominated by the lactobacillus group. In the ileum, the last part here, we have 100 million organisms per gram. Then you've got the domination is the bifidobacteria and lactobacilli are vying for dominance. So you see here increasing numbers, the duodenum, 100,000 organisms per gram. In the jejunum, 10 million organisms per gram. In the ileum, 100 million organisms per gram of scrapings, if you like. Then you look at the large intestine here, and look at the numbers. The large intestine is dominated now by a thing called the Bacteroides. And we won't worry too much about that, but look at the numbers here, 1,000 billion per gram. 1,000 billion. And think of when I was saying that the GI tract flora weighs 1.5 kilos. From a weight point of view, about 1.45 kilos is in the large intestine. And only